Hey everyone. Tonight we begin not in glory, but in a trench choked with mud. Here, boots sink deeper than hope, and every breath tastes of rust and cordite. You've heard the myths of swift German victories, of Pickelhaubes gleaming under the sun. But the truth: the Western Front was a graveyard carved into the earth, an endless line of shattered youth ground into silence by machine guns and gas. This isn't just another story of World War I. It's the betrayal of promises, survival measured in crumbs of black bread, and courage drowned beneath waves of artillery fire. If unmasking history's darkest realities helps you see the past with sharper eyes, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what struggle in your life has felt like a battle without escape now? Pull your coat tighter, dim the lights, and step with me into the trenches where death waits not in moments, but in every moment. You stand there, a young man amongst hundreds, perhaps thousands, gathered in a bustling train station. The year is 1914, and the air hums not with dread, but with a vibrant, almost intoxicating fervor. Your uniform, still crisp, feels unfamiliar on your shoulders, a new skin you've yet to truly inhabit. Around you, families cheer, their faces beaming with a profound sense of national pride, a belief in something grand and glorious. They wave tiny German flags, their colors a stark contrast to the drab gray of your new military jacket. You hear the whispers? Eager pronouncements passed from man to man. Home by Christmas, breakfast in Paris. It's a sweet, comforting melody, a promise sung by your leaders, echoed by the newspapers, and embraced by the entire nation. You imagine the streets of Paris, elegant and grand, conquered and waiting. You envision yourself marching through them, a victor, returning home a hero before the winter snows even begin to fall. This dream, this vivid picture of swift victory, is the fuel that warms you as the train lurches forward, carrying you away from everything familiar, into the unknown. But the wheels of the train turn slowly, deliberately, carrying you not to a swift triumph, but to a place where dreams wither. You arrive, not in the shimmering light of a grand city, but in a landscape already scarred. The fields are churning into a muddy, pock-marked expanse. The cheers fade, replaced by the distant rumble of artillery, a low, guttural growl that seems to vibrate through the very ground beneath your feet. This, you soon realize with a sickening lurch in your stomach, is the Battle of the Marne. The initial lightning advance, the confident surge toward Paris, collapses not with a bang, but with a horrifying, slow crunch. You see the faces of those who came before you, not hardened veterans, but men like you, their eyes wide with a terror that curdles your own blood. Allied artillery, an unseen behemoth, tears through lines of soldiers, transforming flesh and bone into indistinguishable ruin. The vibrant colors of flags are washed away, replaced by the muted tones of mud and blood. The command echoes through the chaotic air, stark and unavoidable. Dig in, dig trenches. The promise of Paris, of breakfast by Christmas, now feels like a cruel jest, a phantom limb that aches with an impossible hope. You grasp a shovel, the cold metal digging into your palm, and you begin to carve into the unwilling earth. The mud is thick, clinging, and insistent, sucking at your boots with each effort. The air, once filled with the scent of optimism, is now choked with the metallic tang of blood, the acrid bite of gunpowder, and the cloying, sweet stench of death that hangs heavy, a shroud over the shattered landscape. You learn, in those first desperate hours, that the enemy is not just the soldiers across the field, but also the very ground beneath you, the sky above, and the lies that brought you here. Your leaders, those who painted such a vivid picture of glory, have betrayed you not with a sudden act, but with a slow, creeping realization that settles deep in your bones. And as you dig deeper and deeper into the unyielding earth, the dream of Paris dissolves, replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of the trench. A profound, quiet sorrow begins to settle within you, a heavy cloak against the cold, indifferent wind. You are one among them, one of the countless faces that now fill the ranks. In just 12 days, Germany's army swelled, a terrifying wave of humanity growing from about 800,000 to an astonishing 3.5 million soldiers. You can feel the sheer press of bodies around you, the collective breath of so many young men, all pulled into the same churning vortex. At just 20 years old, you are barely more than a boy, your hands still soft, your mind still filled with the echoes of your hometown, the comforting rhythm of civilian life. Yet, here you are, adorned in a uniform, drilled with slogans of Kaiser and fatherland, told that your sacrifice is noble, that your spirit is unbreakable. They call you the Iron Youth, a term meant to instill pride, to steel your resolve against the unseen horrors that surely lie ahead. You try to believe it, try to feel the iron in your veins, the strength in your untried muscles. You are told you are invincible, that your youthful vigor is a weapon in itself. But the reality of flesh and bone is a cruel, relentless teacher. The iron in your spirit, however strong, offers no shield against the brutal physics of warfare. The first sounds of battle, the ear-splitting crescendo of distant thunder, becoming the immediate, jarring crack of shells exploding nearby, strip away any illusion of invincibility. You feel the ground shake, not with a heroic tremor, but with a sickening vibration that travels up your legs and into your chest, a harbinger of indiscriminate destruction. Shrapnel, cruel fragments of hot metal from a 75mm shell, rips through the air with a terrifying whistle, tearing through bodies as if they were made of paper. Not the resilient flesh you've always known. You watch, frozen in a primal fear on your very first night, as comrades standing just feet away are obliterated, their forms dissolving into a cloud of dust and blood, their existence erased in an instant. There is no recognition, no time for final words, just a brutal, horrifying silence where a human being once stood. Death comes so swiftly, so indiscriminately, that it leaves no room for anything but a primal, animalistic scramble for survival. In the chaos and the unending night, surrounded by the moans of the wounded and the metallic smell of fresh blood, you find yourself struggling to hold on to the most precious memories. You close your eyes, trying to conjure the gentle curve of your mother's smile, the reassuring crinkles around your father's eyes, the playful glint in your sister's gaze. But the images flicker, ghost-like and elusive, constantly threatened by the immediate, overwhelming horror of the present moment. The faces of your family, so clear just weeks ago, now seem distant, hazy, almost forgotten in the face of such relentless, impersonal destruction. You realize then, with a crushing weight in your chest, that your youth, with all its vigor and promise, is not a symbol of strength here. It is merely raw material, fresh fuel for the insatiable maw of the war machine, to be consumed and discarded as easily as the earth you stand upon. And with this realization, a part of you, the part that once believed in the grand narratives, dies a quiet, internal death, leaving behind a cold, hollow space. You stand in line, your turn approaching, a nervous tremor in your hands as you wait to receive the tools of your new existence. And then, it's in your grasp, the iconic pickelhaube, its polished leather shimmering, the brass spike glinting, an impressive sight indeed. You feel a strange mix of pride and unease as you place it on your head, its weight a new sensation. It looks heroic. This spiked helmet, a symbol of German military might, of a proud heritage. You might even feel a fleeting sense of security, a belief that this impressive piece of equipment will somehow shield you from harm. You are also issued the Mauser-Gewehr 98, a rifle of impressive craftsmanship. Its wooden stock smooth beneath your fingers, the cold steel barrel promising precision. It feels heavy, substantial, a true weapon. With its precise aim, you are told, you will be deadly accurate, a true marksman. But even as you hold it, you note its length, perhaps a little unwieldy, and the small capacity of its internal magazine, only 5 rounds. The initial feeling of assurance, however, is a fragile thing, quickly eroded by the harsh realities of the trench. The majestic pickelhaube, while striking in appearance, offers no real defense against the brutal, indiscriminate force of modern artillery shells. The beautiful brass spike that once symbolized might now feels dangerously exposed, drawing attention in a landscape where invisibility is your only true ally. You see helmets pierced, shattered, offering no more protection than a paper hat. The Mauser-Gewehr 98, for all its vaunted precision, proves to be a weapon tragically ill-suited for the chaotic, close-quarters combat of the trenches. Its length, which might have been an advantage in open-field skirmishes, becomes a cumbersome hindrance in the narrow confines of the dugouts and fire steps, constantly snagging on the earthen walls. And the 5-round magazine, which seemed adequate on the firing range, reveals itself to be a fatal vulnerability. You spend precious, agonizing seconds reloading, fumbling with the stripper clips, while across the broken landscape, you hear the rapid, almost continuous crackle of enemy fire. You learn, with a chilling dread, that the British Lee Enfield rifles can spit out 15 rounds a minute, 3 times the rate of your own weapon, before you even have a chance to chamber a new round. The disparity is terrifying, turning every firefight into a desperate, often losing, race against time. Then there is the butcher blade bayonet, a truly fearsome sight, long and sharp, designed to intimidate and to kill in hand-to-hand combat. You train with it, practice the thrusts and parries. But in the muddy, confused scramble of a trench raid, it rarely proves to be the lifesaver you imagined. Often, it's too long, too clumsy, an impediment rather than an advantage in the tight, claustrophobic spaces where sudden, brutal encounters take place. And as for your straps, your belts, your pouches designed to hold your ammunition and supplies, they constantly snag on barbed wire, tear on rough timber, or become hopelessly caked in the omnipresent mud, making every movement a struggle, every reach for a vital item a delayed, frustrating effort. The realization sinks in. Cold and sharp your equipment, which once seemed to promise heroism and safety, is in truth a collection of deceptive appearances. It looks impressive. Yes, but in this brutal, unforgiving world, it often can't keep you alive. And sometimes, it even actively hinders your survival. You hear it before you see it. A sound that quickly becomes the terrifying soundtrack of your new existence, the rhythmic, mechanical snarl of the MG-08 machine gun. It's a sound that promises no escape, a horrifying lullaby of death. The air is thick with the scent of spent gunpowder, metallic and sharp, mingling with the earthy dampness of the trench walls. And then you see it in action, a brutal, efficient instrument of destruction. This German machine gun, a technological marvel of its time, spits out an astonishing 450 rounds per minute. Each bullet, a tiny messenger of fate, tears through the air with a chilling whine, transforming the scarred expanse of no man's land into a veritable abattoir, a landscape where life is cheap and brutally extinguished. You watch, horrified, as entire sections of attacking troops, often your own, simply vanish, cut down in a spray of dirt and flesh by this unyielding wall of lead. There was a belief, a deep-seated conviction, that the sheer, unmatched firepower of German machine guns would be a decisive advantage. You heard it in the briefings, felt it in the confident pronouncements of your officers. Yet, every attack, every desperate surge across the cratered earth, runs into the same unyielding, brutal wall of fire. Wave after wave of men, armed with rifles and bayonets, are met by this invisible, impassable curtain of bullets. The ground erupts in geysers of mud and shattered rock with each impact, a cruel testament to the gun's relentless hunger. You carry grenades too, of all shapes and sizes, the familiar egg grenades, the spherical Kugel grenades, and the iconic stick grenades, each with its own promise of localized destruction. You learn to throw them, to count the seconds, to pray they find their mark. But rarely do they tip the balance. They are small, desperate bursts against an overwhelming torrent. One misstep, one moment of hesitation, one wrong angle, and your entire unit can be shredded in a terrifying ballet of destruction, reduced to mangled forms scattered across the churned earth in mere seconds. The sound of the MG-08, that incessant, guttural roar, doesn't just assault your ears, it penetrates your very being. Burrowing deep into your mind, it haunts your waking hours, a constant, nagging dread. And when sleep finally claims you, a fragile, exhausted respite, it is there too, echoing in your dreams, driving you to the edge of madness. You wake in a cold sweat, the phantom sound still ringing in your ears, the fear a cold knot in your stomach. It is a constant, unyielding presence, a psychological tormentor as potent as any physical threat. The grim message whispers to you with every volley. With every distant rattle, no one survives long against this wall of German machine gun fire. It is an instrument of utter, impersonal devastation, and you are merely a potential target, waiting for its gaze to turn upon you. Each breath feels like a borrowed moment, each sunrise a fragile reprieve from the inescapable symphony of the meat grinder. You have heard the rumors, the hushed conversations about the quality of German defensive lines. Unlike the hastily dug and often temporary trenches of the Allies, your positions are spoken of with a quiet pride. You begin to see why. These are not mere ditches. They are deep, meticulously designed, their paths zigzagging in intricate patterns to limit the impact of shell fire, reinforced with heavy timber and, in some places, solid concrete. You descend into the earth, down into underground bunkers that plunge sometimes 50 feet below the surface. Here, in the belly of the earth, you find an astonishing, almost unreal level of comfort. There's the flicker of electric light, a small, miraculous glow in the perpetual darkness. There are latrines, simple but functional, offering a semblance of dignity. And, incredibly, there are even makeshift beds, allowing for a few precious hours of rest on something other than the cold, damp earth. You feel a strange sense of safety here, a fleeting illusion that this deep, fortified sanctuary can somehow protect you from the chaos raging overhead. This feeling of security, however, is a fragile, deceptive whisper in the back of your mind. It lasts only until the earth shudders violently, a low, ominous growl that precedes a colossal impact. One heavy artillery shell, a direct hit to the wrong spot, can collapse an entire shelter, transforming your carefully constructed sanctuary into a crushing, suffocating tomb in an instant. You hear the screams of those trapped, the frantic scrabbling as men try to dig out their buried comrades. A desperate fight against the tons of earth that have suddenly become a lethal blanket. Even if the walls hold, life within these subterranean worlds is a constant, grinding assault on your senses. The air, though shielded from the immediate battle, is thick with the damp, earthy smell of the soil, often mingled with the acrid scent of stale sweat and unwashed bodies. You share this confined space with unwelcome, relentless companions. Rats, fat and fearless, scurry through the shadows, their tiny claws scratching an unsettling rhythm against the walls. Lice, an unseen torment, burrow into your clothes, into your hair. Their bites a constant, maddening itch that no amount of scrubbing can truly alleviate. Diseases, born from the close quarters, the poor sanitation, and the general misery, spread like wildfire through the damp, stagnant air. You witness the toll of sickness, the men coughing, feverish, their bodies wasting away, their spirits fading. And then there is the most profound, the most unsettling intimacy with death. Your fallen comrades, those who were just beside you hours ago, are buried in shallow graves, sometimes just outside the bunker entrance, sometimes even within the trench system itself, disturbingly close to where you eat your meager rations and attempt to sleep. The ground beneath you, the very earth you rely on for protection, becomes a silent, unmarked graveyard. You live surrounded by the invisible presence of the dead, their fates a constant, chilling reminder of your own precarious existence. The verdict whispers through the dark, damp tunnels. A cold, inescapable truth, this bunker, with its fleeting promise of comfort and safety, may offer you solace today, a brief reprieve from the storm. But tomorrow, it could just as easily become the silent, suffocating earth that buries you, making no distinction between the living and the dead. The earth gives, and the earth takes, with an indifferent, chilling finality. In the early days of 1914, when the promise of a swift victory still echoed faintly, your daily rations, though simple, felt adequate. You remember the hardtack, a dense, dry biscuit, the pea sausage, somewhat bland but substantial, and the familiar comfort of potatoes. Coffee, sweetened with a small measure of sugar, offered a moment of warmth and a taste of the life you'd left behind. And then there were the small, almost ritualistic luxuries, 2 cigars and 2 cigarettes, carefully rationed, offering fleeting wisps of comfort. a brief escape into a fragrant cloud of smoke that momentarily masked the omnipresent stench of the trenches. These were small mercies, small reminders of humanity in a world fast becoming inhuman. They offered a fragile anchor to normalcy, a brief illusion that life could still hold small pleasures. But as the years grind on, as the war settles into its relentless, murderous rhythm, the rations begin to dwindle, mirroring the fading hopes. By 1917, a grim transformation has occurred. The meat, once a staple, has vanished almost entirely from your plate, a distant memory of a time when abundance was taken for granted. Potatoes, once plentiful and comforting, become scarce, doled out in miserly portions, each bite savored as if it were a rare delicacy. The coffee is now thin, bitter, often without sugar, a pale imitation of its former self. Your portions shrink, shrinking alongside your body, a stark, visible testament to the war's insidious toll. You find yourself gazing at the small handful of food, wondering how it could possibly sustain you through another day of unimaginable physical and mental strain. The hunger gnaws at you, a dull, persistent ache that never truly leaves, a constant, low-frequency hum beneath the cacophony of battle. You resort to desperate measures. Moldy bread, discarded by others, becomes a prized possession, its green flecks overlooked in the overwhelming need to simply eat something, anything. You learn to forage, to barter with the wary civilians in occupied villages, exchanging what little you have, often risking your life, for a few scraps of food. The shame of begging, of resorting to such measures, is a bitter pill to swallow. But the hunger, that relentless, gnawing emptiness, overrides all other considerations. Your body, once strong and vibrant, wastes away, its energy reserves depleted, its resilience slowly eroding. You feel the sharp edges of your own bones beneath your skin, a skeletal blueprint of your former self. Yet, even as your strength ebbs, as your very being cries out for sustenance, the commanders demand more offensives, more pushes, more strength you no longer possess. The irony is a cruel twist. You are fighting for a nation that cannot even feed you. You learn, with a chilling certainty, that hunger is a weapon just as potent as any bullet or shell. It kills slowly, insidiously, stripping you of your strength, your hope, and ultimately, your will. It is a form of torture, a silent, pervasive cruelty that rivals the most violent death, a slow, agonizing descent into nothingness, leaving you hollow and utterly spent. The air hangs heavy and still, a strange, unnatural silence often preceding the storm. Then, you hear the distant, muffled thud, an almost imperceptible sound that carries with it a terrifying premonition. This is 1915, and the Germans, your own side, have introduced a new horror at Ypres chlorine gas. You witness its initial, devastating effect on the Allied lines. A chilling spectacle as great clouds of greenish-yellow gas drift inexorably across no man's land. An ethereal, silent killer. You hear the screams, the choking, desperate cries of those caught in its embrace, their lungs burning, their bodies writhing. It's a terrible, effective weapon, initially. But the nature of war is a brutal, swift educator, and what one side unleashes, the other soon masters. The Allies quickly retaliate, firing gas shells back, perfecting their own insidious poisons. Phosgene gas, deadlier still, often invisible, becomes a new, chilling specter on the battlefield. You learn to recognize the subtle, almost sweet smell, a telltale sign that quickly becomes synonymous with impending doom. The horrors are unimaginable burning lungs that feel as if they are filled with molten lead, eyes that sting and water until they are blinded by excruciating pain, a cough that tears at your throat, bringing up blood, until you feel as if you are drowning alive in your own fluids. You remember the desperate, almost frantic improvisation of soldiers urinating on rags, tying them over their mouths and noses in a crude, barely effective attempt to filter the deadly fumes. It's a primitive defense against a terrifying, modern weapon, a testament to the sheer desperation of men facing an invisible enemy. Even when the first crude gas masks are issued, offering a fragile hope of protection, they come with their own anxieties. The fit must be perfect, the seals tight, the filter unobstructed. Seconds too slow in donning the mask, a slight leak, a moment of panic in the sudden, blinding fog can mean a lifetime of injury, if not immediate death. You see the faces of those who survived, their skin often mottled and scarred, their eyes perpetually weeping, their breath a ragged, painful rasp. They are living ghosts, their bodies a testament to the gas's lingering, destructive power. The air, even after the cloud dissipates, seems to carry a memory of the poison, a lingering fear that clings to your senses. The grim, inevitable truth sinks deep into your bones. You will suffocate, your lungs burning and collapsing, your body racked with pain until the last breath leaves you. Or, perhaps, you will survive, a crippled shadow of your former self, your voice a permanent, rasping whisper, a chilling reminder of the day the Green Death found you, leaving you broken, but cruelly, still alive. The silence after a gas attack is never truly silent, filled with the ghostly echoes of those who choked and the persistent, rattling breaths of those who endured. The low rumble is not of thunder, nor distant artillery, but something far more insidious. It comes from deep beneath your feet, a subtle tremor that vibrates through the very earth of the trench, a chilling whisper from the unseen world below. Both sides, locked in a brutal stalemate above ground, began to tunnel, burrowing like moles beneath no man's land. You are aware of the unseen war happening just inches beneath your boots, a shadowy realm where men work in suffocating darkness, carving out galleries, carefully placing tons of explosives. The very ground, once a source of shelter, now feels treacherous, alive with a hidden menace. You learn to listen, to distinguish the myriad sounds of the trench, the rat scurry, the drip of water, the distant crack of a rifle, from the distinct, unsettling sounds of picks and shovels, the low murmur of voices, the subtle clink of metal against rock. These strange sounds in the earth, barely audible. Mean death is creeping closer, silent and unseen, biding its time. You live with the constant, gnawing fear of the ground suddenly opening up beneath you, of the earth itself betraying its solid promise. The memory of Messines in 1917 becomes a chilling tale passed in hushed tones, a stark warning. There, a staggering 19 mines, packed with nearly 1 million pounds of explosives, detonated simultaneously beneath the German lines. The scale of it is almost incomprehensible, a man-made earthquake. You hear descriptions of how entire sections of trenches, hundreds of men, were simply erased from existence, swallowed by the earth in a blinding flash and an earth-shattering roar. The devastation was so profound, so absolute, that the landscape was utterly transformed, scarred by colossal craters that yawned like the mouths of hell. And the most terrifying aspect of it all is the anonymity of such a death. You could be buried alive in the suffocating darkness, crushed by tons of earth and debris, without ever seeing your enemy's face, without ever firing a single shot in your own defense. The ground, which you have learned to love and hate in equal measure, the same earth that you carve into for shelter, that you bleed upon, now feels like a living, breathing entity capable of turning on you. It trembles, it groans, it betrays you with a silent, devastating power. You learn to walk lightly, to listen intently, every moment a precarious dance on the edge of oblivion. The very soil becomes a source of profound paranoia. Each subtle shift, each muffled thud from below, sends a jolt of ice through your veins, igniting a primal fear. The unspoken outcome hangs heavy in the air, a chilling realization that settles deep in your core. You can die here, in this labyrinth beneath the surface, without ever seeing the sky again, without ever seeing the enemy's face. Your existence extinguished in a sudden, violent upheaval orchestrated from the unseen depths below. The earth, in its silent, unforgiving wrath, can claim you as easily as any bullet, without a whisper of a warning, leaving only an empty space where you once stood. You hear the rumbling first, a deep, guttural sound unlike anything you've ever known, growing steadily louder, vibrating through the earth itself. Then, through the murky haze of smoke and shell fire, a monstrous shape emerges on the horizon. It is 1916, and the British Mark I tanks make their terrifying debut. They are clumsy, slow, almost comical in their awkward, lumbering gait. But their sheer size and armored presence send a jolt of primal fear through you. You watch, transfixed, as these steel leviathans crawl forward, seemingly impervious to your rifle fire, shrugging off bullets as if they were mere pebbles. It's an entirely new kind of dread, a technological nightmare made manifest. You have never encountered anything like it, and your training offers no real answer to such an unstoppable force. By 1917 and 1918, the trickle becomes a flood. Hundreds of these steel beasts, evolving in design and efficiency, roll forward across the broken landscape, a truly horrifying spectacle. The ground trembles beneath their tracks, their engines roar, and their guns spit fire with an unnerving, mechanical precision. They are an unstoppable force, a nightmare of steel and fire that crushes everything in its path. You clutch your Mauser anti-tank rifle, its special armor-piercing rounds meant to halt these behemoths. But you quickly discover the brutal truth: it requires not just a few shots, but thousands of rounds. A focused, relentless fusillade aimed at vulnerable points, to even hope to disable one of these monsters. The sheer volume of fire needed is almost impossible to achieve in the chaos of battle, especially when you are desperately trying to survive. You see your comrades aim artillery pieces, the heavy flak guns, trying to score a direct hit, but the tanks are often too fast, too erratic, or simply too robust for these cumbersome weapons to find their mark in time. The shells often explode uselessly against their thick armor, or miss entirely as the tank lurches forward, an unyielding metal behemoth. The sight of them, slowly but inexorably crawling closer, their armored bulk growing larger with every passing second, is enough to break the strongest men. You witness it with your own eyes, soldiers, hardened by years of brutal trench warfare. Men who have faced machine guns and gas without flinching suddenly break. They drop their weapons, their faces contorted in pure, unadulterated terror. And they run. They scatter in panic, abandoning their positions, their courage utterly crushed by the psychological impact of these steel monsters. This is tank fright, a fear so overwhelming, so profound, that it kills morale before the tank even fires a shot. It is the realization that you are facing something utterly immune to your traditional weapons, a force that simply cannot be stopped, a cold, mechanical terror that reduces men to screaming, fleeing animals. The metallic scent of fear fills the air, mingling with the acrid smoke, a testament to the power of a single, unyielding, steel machine to shatter the human spirit. And you, caught in its relentless gaze, can feel your own resolve beginning to fray, your own knees threatening to buckle. The final year of the war, 1918, feels less like a battle and more like a slow, agonizing unraveling. You are beyond exhausted, your body a mere skeleton of its former self, fueled by the persistent, dull ache of hunger. Your uniform, once crisp, is now tattered and caked with layers of mud and blood. A second skin of misery. The grim reality of attrition has taken its toll, leaving you outgunned, outnumbered, and utterly depleted. The vibrant pride that once swelled within you is replaced by a profound weariness, a bone-deep fatigue that permeates every fiber of your being. The hopeful glint of the pickelhaube, that symbol of a bygone era, has long since given way to the utilitarian, more protective Stahlhelm. Its plain steel a stark contrast to the earlier decorative brass. New weapons arrive: the MP-18 submachine gun, a compact, rapid-fire tool of close-quarters combat, and even flamethrowers, terrifying instruments of immediate, searing death. But they arrive too late, mere whispers in the face of an overwhelming tide. Too few to truly turn the tide of a war already lost. The psychological toll is immense, an invisible wound that festers within the mind. Shell shock spreads like a silent epidemic through the ranks, men trembling, weeping, their eyes vacant, their minds shattered by the ceaseless horror. But in Germany, this profound trauma is not understood, not acknowledged. Instead, it is branded as cowardice, a shameful weakness of spirit. You see traumatized men, their internal worlds fractured beyond repair, dragged from the front lines, often ridiculed, dismissed, their suffering ignored. They are treated not as casualties of war, but as trash, as shameful burdens, never receiving the care, the understanding, or the solace they so desperately need. Their minds, like their bodies, are simply cast aside, deemed unworthy of healing. You watch their broken forms disappear, knowing that their struggle will continue, unseen and unacknowledged, long after the fighting stops. And then, the quiet, almost unbelievable whisper begins to circulate: the war is over. The fighting has ceased. The world goes silent. A sudden, jarring quiet after years of incessant noise. But the relief is not absolute, not the joyous outpouring you once imagined. Instead, it is tinged with a deep, pervasive sorrow, a profound sense of loss that no victory can assuage. In June 1919, the Treaty of Versailles is signed, a document of humiliation that carves deeper wounds into the soul of the nation. sowing the bitter seeds of resentment and grievance. You hear the whispers of injustice, the murmurs of a future unwritten, a fertile ground for new, darker ideologies to take root. The war may have ended, but the battle within the individual, within the nation, is far from over. The final truth, the most enduring legacy of your time in the trenches, settles upon you with a heavy, inescapable weight. Even if you walked away alive, if your body survived the mud, the bullets, the gas, and the hunger your mind, your very soul, would remain buried there. It is a part of you that will forever be intertwined with the desolate landscape, the screams, the stench, the chilling silence. The war doesn't end when the guns fall silent. It continues to rage within the scarred landscape of your memory, an invisible, perpetual conflict. You carry the trenches with you, an unseen burden, a permanent mark on your spirit. And as you step out of the shadows, back into a world that seems impossibly bright and loud, you know, with a quiet, profound certainty that a part of you will forever remain in that mud, listening to the echoes of a war that never truly ends. Your life, forever altered, will carry the indelible imprint of that harrowing journey. A quiet testament to the promises broken, the youth lost, and the ultimate, undeniable betrayal of hope. Our gentle inquiry begins not on a battlefield, but in the quiet corners where thoughts were committed to paper or spoken in hushed tones. You might imagine the faint rustle of aged documents, the soft scratch of a pen, or the low murmur of voices in a dimly lit interrogation room. We are seeking to understand the inner workings of the German High Command during World War II, a complex tapestry woven from respect, disdain, and a chilling sense of dread. Our journey is one of sifting through fragmented evidence, the crisp pages of captured field reports, the cautious answers given in prisoner of war interrogations, the private reflections etched into war diaries, and the carefully crafted narratives of post-war memoirs. Each piece offers a whispered clue, a fragment of truth about how they truly perceived the men leading the armies against them. It's crucial to acknowledge that common myths, often fueled by propaganda or the victor's narratives, rarely align with the raw, unfiltered reality found in these primary sources. You see, praise and contempt, fear and grudging admiration often coexisted in the German generals' minds. They were strategists, after all, and their evaluations were often cold, calculated assessments of strengths and weaknesses, irrespective of political leanings. Their perspective on the war was also colored by the immense differences between the Western and Eastern fronts. In the West, they largely faced an Allied force characterized by overwhelming industrial capacity and logistical might, a relentless tide of material and men that felt almost impossible to stem. In the East, the conflict was perceived through a different lens, one of existential annihilation, marked by a brutal operational art and a desperate struggle for survival against the vastness of the Soviet Union. Deeply ingrained in the German military tradition were core biases that shaped these perceptions. They inherently valorized audacity, a swift, decisive speed of action, and brilliant maneuver warfare, the very essence of their blitzkrieg doctrine. Conversely, they often held a profound disdain for what they termed political generals, those who they believed ascended through connections rather than pure military merit, or whose decisions seemed driven by political expediency rather than strategic necessity. This lens, this inherent bias, influenced every assessment they made of their adversaries. As we gently trace these patterns, you will begin to discern several key themes. There was a clear learning curve, particularly among the American and Soviet forces, which surprised the Germans. They observed the challenges and successes of coalition management among the Allies, and the insidious power of deception operations that consistently misled them, perhaps most profoundly. We will witness their struggles with recovery from the shock of initial defeats, and the chilling realization that their once invincible Wehrmacht was breaking under pressures they had never anticipated. Our thesis tonight, then, is a quiet but profound one: the judgments made by these German generals, in the quiet solitude of their thoughts and reports, expose what truly led to the fracturing of the Wehrmacht. It wasn't simply superior numbers, though that was a factor. It was the Allies' evolving organization, their remarkable capacity for adaptation, and the steadfast cohesion of their coalitions that ultimately proved fatal to Germany's war efforts. You are about to step into the minds of those who faced this reality, a reality far more nuanced than the simplistic narratives often portray. Let us now turn our attention to the figure who, in 1942, was largely dismissed by the German High Command, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Initially, you might imagine the German generals, steeped in their tradition of swift, decisive battlefield command, looking at Eisenhower and seeing merely an organizer, not a soldier. His initial foray, Operation Torch, the Allied landings in North Africa, was viewed through a critical German lens as clumsy, almost amateurish. Its eventual success, they believed, was due less to any brilliant military prowess and more to the sheer, overwhelming weight of material resources the Allies could bring to bear. It was a perception rooted in their own doctrines, where a general was expected to be a master of maneuver and direct operational command. However, as the North African campaign progressed, a rapid recalibration of this perception began. You can almost feel the shift in their assessments as the fighting in Tunisia unfolded. Under Eisenhower's steady coordination, particularly in the crucible of battle, the American forces, though initially green, began to mature. The German reports would subtly note a growing proficiency, a developing resilience that surprised them. It wasn't about a single brilliant tactic, but a gradual, inexorable improvement. Then came the campaigns in Sicily and Italy. Here, the German generals began to experience a dawning awe, not for a single audacious battlefield stroke, but for the sheer scale of the Allied operations. You might picture the German intelligence officers trying to track the movements, the seamless, intricate orchestration of naval power providing bombardments and landings, the relentless air cover dominating the skies, and the ground forces advancing across challenging terrain. All of this was coordinated across multiple nations, each with its own proud leadership and sometimes conflicting egos. Eisenhower's ability to bind these disparate elements into a cohesive, advancing force was something the Germans, with their more centralized command structure, found both perplexing and increasingly formidable. The pinnacle of this growing German respect, however, arrived with Normandy, Operation Overlord. The D-Day landings and the subsequent campaign was read by the German High Command as nothing short of a masterpiece. Not a masterpiece of frontline tactics, perhaps, but a triumph of organization and, critically, of deception management. You can envision the German generals poring over intelligence reports, baffled by the sheer audacity of the landing, and then realizing how thoroughly they had been fooled by the complex web of phantom armies and feints that Eisenhower's headquarters had masterminded. The sheer logistical feat of sustaining such a massive invasion, launching it across the English Channel, and then expanding the beachhead against determined resistance, left a deep impression. Even during the darkest hours for the Allies, such as the desperate winter offensive of the Battle of the Bulge, Eisenhower's strengths shone through. The German command, hoping to fracture the Allied coalition, watched in dismay as Eisenhower exhibited calm crisis control. You might imagine the German commanders receiving intelligence of rapid, decisive reinforcements, swiftly moved to bolster crumbling lines, and a steadfast Allied cohesion under immense stress. Their hopes of driving a wedge between the Western Allies evaporated as Eisenhower held his coalition together. The final verdict from the German perspective, then, settled into a grudging yet undeniable respect. Eisenhower was not an operational artist in the dramatic, direct battlefield sense they so revered. He didn't personally lead charges or devise daring encirclements in the field. Instead, he was the indispensable binder, the quiet, steady hand that held together the immense, powerful, and often unwieldy coalition. His genius lay in logistics, planning, and inter-allied diplomacy, precisely the qualities that proved fatal to German hopes of seeing the Allied war effort fracture and dissolve. He was the architect of their inevitable defeat, a realization that must have settled heavily in the quiet contemplation of many German minds. Now, let us turn our gaze to a figure who, for the German High Command, embodied a different kind of terror. General George S. Patton. You might imagine the German officers, schooled in the doctrines of swift, armored thrusts, initially observing the early American forces with a degree of condescension. But then came the crucible of Kasserine Pass, an early and bitter taste of American inexperience. Yet, from that very defeat, the Germans watched in growing astonishment as a profound transformation took place. Under Patton's demanding leadership, a new American army emerged, one that combined fierce discipline with relentless aggression. It was as if their own blitzkrieg doctrine had been studied, understood, and now, shockingly, turned back upon them with an American ferocity. The legend of Patton truly began to solidify in Sicily. You can picture the maps in German headquarters, marked with his audacious dash across the island, the lightning-fast seizure of Palermo, and the subsequent race to Messina. This was speed, initiative, and a disregard for conventional operational pauses that deeply resonated with and profoundly disturbed the German generals. From this moment, Patton was flagged as uniquely dangerous, a commander whose unpredictability and sheer momentum threatened to unravel their carefully constructed defensive lines. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of steel and fury. The psychological impact of Patton was immense, amplified by the Allied deception plan. Operation Fortitude, German intelligence, ever keen to identify the most dangerous opponent, made a critical error. They assumed Patton would lead the real invasion of Europe. You can almost feel the tension in their command centers as they allocated precious resources to track his phantom army, tying up divisions and reinforcing coastal defenses in areas that would never be attacked. This misdirection, expertly managed by the Allies, played directly into German perceptions of Patton as the spearhead of any major thrust, making him a weapon even before he landed in France. When Operation Cobra finally broke through the hedgerows of Normandy, it was Patton's Third Army that unleashed the fury. The Germans watched, or rather, desperately tried to react, as his columns initiated a breathtaking pursuit. You can imagine the frantic reports of speed, deep encirclements, and a shocking lack of operational pause. "He gives us no rest," echoed through German command posts, a testament to his relentless drive. His forces seemed to possess an inexhaustible energy, bypassing resistance, cutting off retreat routes, and plunging deep into French territory. It was a terrifying echo of their own early war successes. But now, it was they who were on the receiving end. Even when faced with challenges, Patton's pressure was unrelenting. In the difficult terrain of Lorraine, particularly around the ancient fortress city of Metz, his impatience was noted by the Germans. They saw moments where his aggression perhaps outpaced caution. Yet, even here, that unyielding pressure, that relentless grinding of his forces against their defenses, slowly but surely wore down German resistance. It was a war of attrition married to a war of movement, a combination that proved devastating. The ultimate sealing of Patton's feared reputation came during the Battle of the Bulge. As the German offensive initially surged, threatening to split the Allied lines, it was Patton's lightning maneuver, pivoting his entire army north through deep snow and icy roads to relieve the besieged paratroopers at Bastogne, that cemented his status. You can picture the German high command, watching their last great offensive unravel, as Patton's relentless drive broke through to Bastogne. For them, he was feared above all. He was the commander who had mastered the art of speed and aggression, turning the very principles of blitzkrieg against its originators. A truly formidable and terrifying adversary. As the quiet morning mist of history continues to swirl around us, let us now consider another formidable adversary, one whose approach stood in stark contrast to Patton's fiery dashes, Field Marshal Bernard L. Montgomery. You might imagine the German generals meticulously analyzing his campaigns, seeing not the flamboyant charge, but the slow, methodical, and utterly relentless advance of an unstoppable force. His reputation, from a German perspective, was forged early in the deserts of North Africa at El Alamein. Here, even the legendary Field Marshal Rommel, a commander of exceptional skill himself, grudgingly acknowledged Montgomery's professionalism. You can envision Rommel's staff reports detailing Montgomery's meticulous preparation, his unwavering focus on troop morale, and the overwhelming massed firepower he brought to bear. It was a battle of attrition. Yes, but executed with a devastating precision and a thoroughness that left no doubt about the outcome. Montgomery built an unshakable confidence in his troops and unleashed them with overwhelming force, a tactic the Germans respected even as they suffered its consequences. Later, in Sicily and during the slow, arduous campaign up the Italian boot, the German assessment of Montgomery began to solidify. He was perceived as slow, predictable in his operational tempo, almost painfully methodical. You might picture the German intelligence predicting his next moves with a certain weary resignation. Yet, crucially, he was also recognized as being incredibly hard to stop once his well-oiled machine began to roll. His advances were not about surprise, but about an inexorable application of power. He would meticulously build up his forces, ensure every detail was covered, and then press forward with a weight that simply crushed opposition. This pattern was particularly evident in the brutal fighting around Caen after the D-Day landings. You can almost hear the sighs of frustration in German command posts as they watched Montgomery execute a series of operations: Epsom, Charnwood, Goodwood. These weren't flashy breakthroughs. Instead, they were deliberate, grinding battles designed to fix German panzer reserves, tying them down in heavy fighting in the British sector. This strategic pinning was crucial, allowing the American forces under other commanders to break out from their positions and execute their more fluid maneuvers. Montgomery, in the German view, was content to be the anvil, upon which the German forces were hammered, while others acted as the swift hammer. Then came Operation Market Garden, a rare and audacious gamble by Montgomery in September 1944. This was an airborne assault designed to seize key bridges and open a direct route into Germany, potentially ending the war early. From the German perspective, it was widely seen as Monty's folly, a reckless overreach that failed spectacularly. You might imagine the German commanders feeling a surge of relief and even a touch of schadenfreude as they successfully counterattacked and shattered the Allied airborne divisions. Yet, even in its failure, there was a grudging acknowledgement that the risk itself, had it succeeded, could indeed have altered the course of the war dramatically. It was a reminder that even the methodical Montgomery was capable of audacity, though perhaps less frequently than his American counterparts. By the Rhineland campaigns in 1945, particularly Operations Veritable and Plunder, the German verdict on Montgomery was firmly set. His offensives were textbook examples of sledgehammer blows. Immense concentrations of artillery, overwhelming infantry, and armored thrusts. There was no finesse, no attempt at elegant maneuver, simply the total effect of an industrial war machine brought to bear. You can picture the German defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, facing wave after wave of meticulously planned and executed attacks, understanding that resistance was futile against such an immense and unwavering application of force. The German generals ultimately viewed Montgomery as arrogant, yes, and often overcautious, prone to excessive planning and deliberate execution. But they also recognized him as profoundly dependable and, crucially, a general who was very rarely beaten. He was a commander who, through sheer weight of preparation and resources, consistently achieved his objectives, even if it took him longer than others. He was a relentless, unyielding force, a formidable opponent who, despite his perceived flaws, commanded a certain inescapable respect in the German mind. Let us now shift our contemplative gaze to another figure, less flamboyant than Patton, less outwardly assertive than Montgomery, yet equally instrumental in the Allied victory, General Omar Bradley. For the German generals, Bradley was often perceived as the quiet one, a stark contrast to the often bombastic personalities of other Allied commanders. Yet, beneath this low profile lay an engine of high efficiency, a general whose steady hand and meticulous coordination consistently delivered devastating blows. You might picture him in German reports as the silent force, the one who orchestrated vast, complex operations with a calm, almost understated precision. His role began with the profound challenge of D-Day, specifically on Omaha Beach. Here, facing some of the fiercest German resistance, the American assault teetered on the brink of disaster. You can almost feel the chaos, the desperate struggle as the first waves of American soldiers faced slaughter on the heavily fortified sands. Yet, through this critical hour, Bradley maintained his composure, making the necessary adjustments, ensuring that the beachhead was ultimately held. The German defenders, even in their desperate struggle, must have recognized the steely resolve and unwavering determination of the American forces under his command, an unflappable presence guiding them through the tempest. Following the initial landings, the Allied forces encountered the formidable challenge of the Norman hedgerows, a labyrinth of ancient, earthen embankments that turned every field into a miniature fortress. This was a brutal, slow, and deadly form of warfare. However, under Bradley's leadership, the American forces demonstrated a remarkable learning loop. You can imagine German forward observers reporting the sudden appearance of ingenious hedgerow cutters attached to American tanks, or the increasingly effective integration of close air support CAS that would pinpoint and obliterate German strongholds. It was a demonstration of adaptive combined arms maturity, a quiet but relentless innovation that slowly chipped away at the German defenses, leaving them with fewer places to hide. This methodical adaptation culminated in Operation Cobra, a pivotal moment that truly showcased Bradley's strategic genius. You might envision the German lines, already strained, subjected to an apocalyptic bombardment, an aerial deluge that simply erased their cohesion. This unprecedented air assault, followed immediately by a powerful ground attack, shattered the German front, creating a massive breach that the Allied armored forces, including Patton's Third Army, could then exploit. Bradley orchestrated this devastating 1-2 punch with a calm, almost machine-like efficiency, turning an entrenched stalemate into a decisive breakthrough. Yet, even in victory, a moment of caution on Bradley's part drew specific attention from the Germans: the delay at Falaise. As the American forces closed in from the west and the British and Canadian forces from the north, there was an opportunity to completely encircle and annihilate a vast German army. The delay in fully closing the Falaise Gap allowed many German soldiers to escape the trap. You might imagine a strange, almost ironic sense of gratitude among the German soldiers who managed to slip through the narrowing corridor, though their escaping formations were still crippled and severely mauled. This momentary caution, though it preserved some German lives, did not prevent the larger, strategic defeat. Finally, during the desperate winter counteroffensive of the Battle of the Bulge, Bradley's calm effectiveness was once again evident. He stabilized his sector, meticulously timed the Allied counterblows, waiting for the weather to clear and allow the crucial return of Allied air power. You can picture him making these precise calculations, ensuring that when the counteroffensive struck, it would do so with maximum impact. His leadership during this critical period was characterized by a machine-like relentlessness, a steady, unwavering application of force that slowly but surely ground down the last vestiges of German offensive capability. For the German generals, Bradley represented the quiet, efficient, and ultimately unstoppable engine of American industrial might, a force that, once set in motion, proved impossible to halt. Let us now gently turn our attention to a figure who, though perhaps not a general in the mold of the others we've discussed, nonetheless wielded an immense, almost symbolic power against the German occupation, Charles de Gaulle. For the German High Command, de Gaulle's trajectory was a perplexing one, transforming from a rebel general who defied the surrender of France into a potent symbol of national resistance. You might imagine the German propaganda machine initially attempting to discredit him, to paint him as a traitor or an inconsequential exile. Yet, ironically, their very attacks served only to prove his growing relevance, his voice resonating far beyond the borders of occupied France. The Free French forces, operating under de Gaulle's banner, first encountered German forces in North Africa and then in the grueling campaigns in Italy. Here, the German soldiers and commanders witnessed their ferocity firsthand. You can almost feel the shock in German tactical reports describing the intensity of the Free French attacks, their unwavering morale, and a palpable revenge motif driving their combat. These were not dispirited, defeated soldiers. These were men fighting to reclaim their national honor, and their will to resist was fierce and undeniable. Their presence complicated German military planning, requiring resources and attention that might otherwise have been directed elsewhere. The profound symbolic impact of de Gaulle reached its zenith with the liberation of Paris in 1944. You might envision the scene from the German perspective, a city they had proudly occupied for 4 years, now slipping from their grasp, not primarily by Allied might, but by the entry of French forces, led by General Leclerc's division, under de Gaulle's ultimate authority. This was a crushing humiliation for Germany, a public restoration of French honor that resonated deeply, not just in France, but across the world. For the German High Command, it was a bitter pill, a public declaration that their conquest was undone. Despite often operating with uneven equipment and sometimes disparate units, the will of the Free French, and crucially, de Gaulle's own unshakable resolve, remained unbroken. His leadership demonstrated a remarkable ability to convert this powerful symbolism of resistance into tangible combat effect. He wasn't on the front line directing fire, but his presence, his unwavering belief in France's destiny, inspired thousands to fight, turning scattered elements into a legitimate, if sometimes challenging, fighting force. You can sense the quiet frustration in German staff meetings as they realized that even without vast resources, de Gaulle's moral authority was a powerful weapon. In the post-war German view, de Gaulle was often categorized more as a politician than a tactician. They understood that his military contributions, while significant, were perhaps less about battlefield brilliance and more about strategic representation. Yet, they also recognized that his steadfast leadership had given France a second life, ensuring it remained a relevant power in the post-war world rather than a defeated nation. You can almost hear the grudging respect in their assessments. The net effect of Charles de Gaulle, from the German perspective, was immense. He represented a morale and legitimacy force that profoundly complicated German occupation calculus. His very existence challenged the German narrative of a defeated, compliant France. He kept the flame of resistance alive, contributing to the internal destabilization of occupied territories and forcing the diversion of German troops and resources away from the front lines. He was a constant, irritating, and ultimately powerful reminder that the spirit of a nation, even when militarily vanquished, could continue to fight, proving that true defeat often begins, or ends, in the quiet corners of the mind. Our tranquil journey now shifts eastward, to a theater of war utterly brutal and on a scale almost unimaginable in the West. Here, we encounter a figure of immense strategic weight and formidable ruthlessness, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the Iron Fist of the Red Army. For the German generals, Zhukov was synonymous with an inexorable, overwhelming force, a commander who shattered their long-held belief in the inevitability of German victory. You can almost feel the creeping chill that must have settled over German command posts as Zhukov's name became increasingly associated with catastrophic defeats. The first profound shock came in the bitter winter of 1941 outside Moscow. After months of seemingly unstoppable advances, the German offensive was suddenly, violently, halted and then driven back. You might imagine the stunned disbelief among German officers as Zhukov, leveraging freshly arrived Siberian reserves and the brutal Russian winter, unleashed devastating counterblows. This was the first shattering of German inevitability, a stark and chilling realization that the Red Army, despite immense losses, was not broken. It was a turning point, both militarily and psychologically. Then came Stalingrad, a name that would forever be etched into the German psyche as a symbol of their undoing. Zhukov. As a key architect, masterminded Operation Uranus, the brilliant encirclement of the German Sixth Army. You can picture the German staff frantically tracing the movements on their maps as vast numbers of Soviet forces, exploiting weak flanks, achieved a surprise on a strategic scale. The sheer mass of men and materiel, combined with a chillingly precise targeting of vulnerabilities, led to the catastrophic entrapment of hundreds of thousands of German soldiers. It was a demonstration of operational mastery that left the German High Command reeling. Kursk, in the summer of 1943, presented another, different kind of German despair. This time, Zhukov orchestrated a defensive masterpiece. You might imagine the German panzer commanders, confident in their new tanks and their planned offensive, being met not with a brittle line, but with defensive depth. Mile after mile of anti-tank obstacles, minefields, and deeply entrenched positions. Zhukov's timing, his uncanny ability to unleash powerful counterstrokes at precisely the right moment, broke the aura of invincibility that had once surrounded the German panzer divisions. It was a meat grinder that systematically destroyed Germany's armored spearheads, ending their ability to launch large-scale strategic offensives in the east. The summer of 1944 brought Operation Bagration, an offensive that, for the German High Command, was nothing short of apocalyptic. You can picture the grim faces in German headquarters as reports poured in, detailing the annihilation of Army Group Center. This was operational mastery on an unprecedented scale. A series of thrusts and encirclements that utterly destroyed an entire army group, pushing the front hundreds of miles westward in a matter of weeks. It was a strategic catastrophe that left no doubt about the Red Army's capability, and Zhukov's genius in orchestrating such a vast and complex operation. Finally, in the desperate days of 1945, Zhukov led the drive on Berlin. You might envision the final, brutal urban battle, fought street by street, building by building. This was the largest urban battle in history, and Zhukov drove it to its bitter conclusion with sheer, organized force, accepting immense casualties but relentlessly pushing forward. The German defenders, outnumbered and outgunned, faced a methodical, pulverizing advance that left no room for escape. The German verdict on Zhukov was unequivocal. He was ruthless, absolutely tolerant of enormous casualties, but devastatingly effective. He was a master coordinator of vast armies, a commander who understood how to harness the immense resources of the Soviet Union and apply them with crushing force. You can sense the respect, tinged with a profound fear, in their assessments of him. Zhukov was the embodiment of the Red Army's relentless power, an unyielding force that relentlessly pushed them back, ultimately leading to their total defeat. Continuing our gentle descent into the strategic minds of the German command, we now encounter another architect of Soviet victory, one often viewed with a distinct, almost grudging respect, Marshal Konstantin Rokosovski. You might picture the German intelligence analysts, initially underestimating the Soviets, then gradually being forced to acknowledge the emergence of highly skilled commanders like him. His early contributions were seen during the brutal winter battles around Moscow. Here, Rokosovski's forces executed concentrated counterattacks that not only helped stem the German tide, but also signaled a crucial point in the Soviet learning curve. You can imagine the German commanders, expecting disorganized resistance, instead finding themselves facing well-coordinated, effective strikes. This was not merely stubborn defense, it was a demonstration of increasing tactical sophistication. Rokosovski was also a key architect in the planning of Operation Uranus at Stalingrad. While Zhukov provided the overall strategic direction, Rokosovski was instrumental in the methodical details of the encirclement, showcasing a preference for precision over wasteful frontal assaults. You might envision him meticulously poring over maps, identifying the exact points of vulnerability, ensuring that every unit was in place for the devastating pincer movement that trapped the German Sixth Army. His approach highlighted a growing professionalism in the Red Army, moving beyond mere brute force. During the monumental clash at Kursk, Rokosovski commanded the Central Front, responsible for the crucial northern face of the salient. Here, he demonstrated his exceptional ability to read the German offensive, anticipating Field Marshal models' armored thrusts and blunting them with a defense in extraordinary depth. You can imagine the German panzer divisions grinding to a halt against layer after layer of fortifications, minefields, and anti-tank ditches, meticulously prepared under Rokosovski's guidance. This was a testament to his foresight and defensive acumen, a calculated stonewall against the elite German formations. Perhaps his most remarkable display of operational brilliance, from the German perspective, came during Operation Bagration in 1944. Rokosovski famously argued for, and won, a daring double envelopment, a complex maneuver that went against the initial, simpler plans proposed by the Soviet High Command. You might picture the German staff officers, already under immense pressure, studying the unfolding disaster and being stunned by the sheer sophistication of the Soviet offensive. Rokosovski's audacious yet precise plan led to the catastrophic destruction of Army Group Center, a level of strategic artistry that commanded a chilling respect. In the final operations of 1945, particularly in the advance into Germany, Rokosovski's approach continued to distinguish him, while Zhukov often favored a more blunt, direct application of overwhelming force. Rokosovski frequently employed greater flexibility and maneuver. You can imagine the German defenders facing not just a wall of steel, but a series of fluid movements, unexpected thrusts, and clever encirclements that kept them constantly off balance. This refined approach demonstrated a mastery that transcended the purely attritional nature of much of the Eastern Front. The quiet verdict from many German generals was that Rokosovski was the calm professional they respected most among the Soviet commanders. He wasn't just about overwhelming numbers. He combined mass with method, precision with adaptability. He was a commander who, even in the crucible of the Eastern Front, displayed a tactical and operational elegance that the Germans, with their own veneration of skilled maneuver, could not help but admire, even as it contributed to their ultimate downfall. Let us now cast our gaze upon the third, equally formidable figure in the triumvirate of key Soviet marshals, Ivan Konev. His story, from the German perspective, is one of remarkable resilience and rapid strategic evolution. A commander who learned from early setbacks and consistently adapted to the brutal realities of the Eastern Front. You might imagine the German generals initially dismissing him after early Soviet disasters, only to be repeatedly surprised by his tenacious rise and increasingly effective command. Indeed, Konev suffered early setbacks, notably during the Second Battle of Kharkov in 1942. These were deeply discouraging defeats for the Soviets. Yet, what surprised the Germans was that such early failures did not end his career. Instead, he absorbed the bitter lessons, refined his methods, and steadily grew in stature. You can almost feel the German commander's confusion as a general they thought might be outmaneuvered continually reappeared, stronger and more cunning than before. His capacity for adaptation truly became evident during the Battle of Kursk. Konev commanded the steppe front, held in reserve but ready to launch a crucial counterblow. You might picture the German offensive, exhausted from pushing against Zhukov's defensive lines, suddenly facing Konev's reserve armor at Prokhorovka. While often portrayed as a chaotic tank battle, Konev's deployment of these powerful armored reserves was instrumental in shifting the momentum in the southern sector. His ability to time and execute such a vital counteroffensive showed a developing strategic acumen. By 1944, Konev was leading operations that showcased a profound understanding of deep penetrations and rapid exploitation. Campaigns like the Lvov-Sandomierz offensive and the thrust through the Carpathian Mountains demonstrated his mastery of mobile warfare. You can imagine German intelligence tracking his forces, aghast at the speed and depth of his advances, as his armies bypassed strongpoints, outflanked defenses, and plunged deep into their rear areas. This was the Red Army employing tactics that mirrored the very principles of blitzkrieg, a chilling reversal of roles. The brutal winter of 1945 saw Konev unleash one of his most devastating offensives, the Vistula-Oder Surge. Here, the German High Command realized with a profound sense of despair that our own methods were being used against us. You might picture the German defenders reeling from the sheer speed and momentum of Konev's forces as they swept across Poland and deep into Germany. This was not simply an attritional grind. It was a rapid, overwhelming advance that broke the German lines and left them shattered. Konev had become a master of combining overwhelming force with swift, decisive maneuver. As the war drew to its close, Konev continued his relentless advance, driving his forces on a southern axis towards Berlin, seizing Dresden, and thrusting into Czechoslovakia. You can imagine the final, desperate German efforts to hold back his powerful armies. As Konev's forces closed the ring around the Third Reich, he was a commander whose strategic vision and tactical flexibility shone brightly in the final, climactic battles. The verdict from the German perspective was that Konev masterfully blended the Red Army's immense capacity for attrition with skillful maneuver. He was a flexible strategist, a crucial component in the formidable Soviet trio of Zhukov, Rokosovski, and himself. He represented the Red Army's evolving ability to not just absorb blows, but to learn, adapt, and then deliver devastating counterpunches with a speed and precision that continually surprised and ultimately overwhelmed their German adversaries. Our tranquil historical journey now brings us to Vasily Zhukov, a general whose name, for many Germans, was synonymous with a particular visceral nightmare urban annihilation. And with his story, we will gently gather the threads of German perception, synthesizing their final, chilling verdict on the Allied commanders. You might imagine Zhukov less as a grand strategist and more as a brutal, pragmatic street fighter, perfectly suited for the desperate, meter-by-meter carnage that characterized Stalingrad. It was in Stalingrad that Zhukov developed his infamous tactic of hugging the enemy. You can almost feel the claustrophobia of the German soldiers, desperately trying to call in air and artillery support, only to find it rendered useless by the Soviet forces operating literally within yards of their positions. This brutal, close-quarters fighting nullified the Luftwaffe and German artillery, turning the sprawling city into a series of terrifying, confined killing zones. It was a war of attrition stripped down to its most savage form, a constant, grinding battle that left the Germans bleeding out in the rubble. Zhukov was, without a doubt, a street fighter general. His style was crude, direct, and utterly devoid of pretense. Yet it was perfectly suited for the unique horrors of urban warfare. You might picture him, a harsh, unforgiving presence, demanding every ounce of effort from his guards units, pushing them relentlessly through the ruins. This was a general who understood how to wage war in the most brutal environments, turning every building into a fortress and every street into a battleground. His 8th Guards Army, hardened by Stalingrad, became a spearhead for the Red Army's relentless advances in 1945. You can imagine the despair of the German defenders as Zhukov's forces, still imbued with that same relentless, close-quarters pressure, drove through the Vistula-Oder offensive and into the final, agonizing battle for Berlin. They were a force of unyielding determination, smashing through defenses with a ferocity born of their past crucible. Bringing all these perceptions together, the German High Command, in their quiet, retrospective analyses, developed a nuanced taxonomy of their adversaries. General Patton, with his audacious speed and relentless aggression, was genuinely feared above all others. You might sense the apprehension in their reports whenever his name appeared. Generals Montgomery and Bradley, while sometimes criticized for their caution or methodical approaches, were ultimately respected as inevitable. Their forces, backed by immense industrial might, were seen as an unstoppable tide that, once set in motion, could not be halted. And General Eisenhower, though not a battlefield artist in their traditional sense, was recognized as the decisive binder for the Allied coalition, the indispensable leader whose organizational genius prevented their fracture. On the Eastern Front, the impact of the Soviet trio was profound and multifaceted. Zhukov represented the sheer iron mass of the Red Army, its overwhelming power and capacity for relentless offensive. Rokosovski, with his precision and strategic flair, embodied the Red Army's growing sophistication and mastery of complex maneuvers. Konev, the adaptable and accelerating strategist, completed the trio, demonstrating flexibility and deep penetration capabilities. And then there was Zhukov, the brutal street fighter, who became the nightmare in the cities, a symbol of the close quarters, annihilating combat that consumed German forces. Our quiet historical journey concludes with a profound lesson that ultimately broke the Wehrmacht. It wasn't simply a matter of superior tactics or brilliant maneuvers. Though these played their part, it was the Allies' superior organization, their astonishing capacity for adaptation in the face of new challenges, and, perhaps most crucially, the steadfast cohesion of their coalitions. You can almost feel the weight of this realization in the German generals' final assessments. They lost not just to a collection of individual commanders, but to an interconnected, evolving system that learned, adapted, and relentlessly pressed its advantage until total victory was achieved. And perhaps, as you drift off into a peaceful rest, you can ponder how such a complex tapestry of respect, fear, and reluctant admiration shaped the final outcome of one of history's greatest conflicts.